The money hit the ground with a dull, final sound. Coins scattered at her feet, glinting in the afternoon sun, rolling through the dust where everyone could see them. The crowd fell silent. Children stopped laughing. Traders froze with goods still in their hands. All eyes turned to the woman standing in the center of the market. She did not move. A man stepped forward, anger rising in his voice, and pushed the money closer to her bare toes. It was more than enough to eat for weeks, enough to silence any doubt. Still, she didn't touch it. She didn't even look down. Instead, she slowly stepped back. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered a prayer. Another muttered that no sane person refused money like that. The woman's hands trembled at her sides, clenched tightly, as if touching those coins would burn her skin. "Take it," the man demanded. "It's yours." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes filled with something heavier than fear, something that looked like grief. Then she turned away, leaving the money in the dirt. Behind her, the market erupted in shouting, confusion, and rage. Because in a village where money meant survival, only one question mattered now. What kind of woman would rather walk away than touch it? Morning in the village arrived softly, the way it always had. Before the sun fully lifted itself above the trees, smoke already curled from cooking fires. Roosters crowed, goats bleated impatiently, and bare feet pressed familiar paths into the red earth. Women swept their yards with short brooms made of dry grass, their movements practiced and unhurried. Children chased one another between mud-brick homes, laughter echoing as the smell of porridge drifted through the air. By mid-morning, the market began to breathe. Wooden stalls were propped open. Bowls of groundnuts, cassava, dried fish, and bright cloth were laid out with care. Coins changed hands with soft clinks and quick smiles. Bargaining was not a fight here, it was a dance. Everyone knew the rhythm. Money was not greed, it was order. It paid school fees. It bought medicine. It kept roofs standing when the rains came. No one questioned it. At the center of it all stood the trading tree, its wide branches offering shade that generations had relied on. Elders gathered there to talk. Travelers rested there to count their earnings. Children were sent there with small coins clutched in tight fists, trusted to return with bread or salt. Life moved forward, predictable and steady. And yet, just beyond the busiest path, there was a small gap in the rhythm. Her hut sat slightly apart from the others, not hidden, but not central either. Its walls were clean, its doorway swept each morning like the rest, but there was no stall in front of it. No goods laid out. No prices called into the air. People passed by without thinking much of it, the way you pass a stone that has always been there. She rose before most, fetched water without speaking, and returned with her bucket balanced easily on her head. When someone dropped a load of firewood, she was already there to help lift it. When a child scraped a knee, it was her cloth that cleaned the blood. When an old man's roof sagged, her hands appeared among the others, steady and willing. She gave freely. Food, time, labor, whatever she had, she shared. And when people thanked her, they did so the way they thanked the wind or the rain, with gratitude but without questions. What she never did was accept anything back. Coins offered in kindness were quietly set aside. Payment for work was refused with a small shake of her head. If someone insisted, she simply stepped away, leaving the exchange unfinished. No anger. No explanation. Just distance. At first, it felt harmless. Some even admired it. They said she was humble, that she was blessed, that she lived lightly in a world that asked for too much. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into years, her absence from the flow of money became noticeable, not loud, not dramatic, just persistent. She never held coins, never stored them, never counted them. When traders joked about profit, she smiled but did not join in. And still, life in the village continued. Children grew. Seasons shifted. The market buzzed and quieted again. Money passed from hand to hand, solving problems, creating others, doing what it had always done. Only one thing never changed. No matter how normal the day, no matter how calm the village felt, there was always the quiet presence of a woman living among them, fully part of their world, yet untouched by the thing they all depended on. And no one yet understood why. People knew her, but no one could say when she had truly arrived. She had simply been there one day, woven into the life of the village so naturally that her presence felt older than memory. The elders said she came from the riverside. Others believed she had always lived on that land, long before the market grew loud and busy. When asked, she never corrected anyone. She only smiled, the kind of smile that ended a conversation without answering it. Her name was spoken gently, not because it was sacred, but because she carried herself in a way that softened the air around her. She moved slowly, never rushing, never pushing past others. When she listened fully, her eyes lowered, her attention undivided. When she laughed, it was quiet, almost surprised, as if joy visited her unexpectedly. She was different, but never distant. Children followed her without being called. They sat near her while she worked, handing her small tools, asking endless questions. She answered some and ignored others, choosing her words carefully, like someone measuring each one before letting it go. When a child asked why she never bought sweets at the market, she brushed dust from the child's knees and changed the subject. The women trusted her with their secrets. They spoke to her about hunger, about tiredness, about husbands who did not listen and sons who no longer looked back when they walked away. She never offered advice unless it was asked for. Even then, her words were simple. Be patient. Rest when you can. Not everything must be carried alone. Sometimes she said nothing at all, and somehow that helped more. The men respected her without fully understanding why. She worked alongside them in the fields when extra hands were needed, lifting more than her thin frame suggested she could. She never complained of heat or pain. When she was injured, she bound her own wounds and returned the next day as if nothing had happened. If offered payment, she refused with a calm that made insisting feel rude. "What do you want, then?" someone once asked, half laughing. She looked up at him, eyes steady. "Nothing that can be counted," she said. After that, people stopped asking directly. Still, curiosity lived in the spaces between conversations. At night, when fires burned low and voices dropped, theories passed from one mouth to another. Some said she had made a vow. Others whispered she had lost her mind after a great loss. A few claimed she was being punished by spirits and feared that money would carry something dark. No one said these things to her face, because nothing about her felt broken. Her hut, though simple, was always in order. Her clothes were worn but clean. She never begged. She never took more than she needed. When food appeared at her door, she shared it before it cooled. When nothing came, she went without quietly. What unsettled people most was not her refusal of money. It was the sense that she was choosing it. One afternoon, a trader from another village tried to press coins into her palm after she helped him repair a broken wheel. He laughed, thinking she was being polite. When he forced the money into her hand, her body stiffened. For a brief moment, her breath caught, and something dark flickered across her face. Fear, or pain, or memory. She dropped the coins as if they were alive. They hit the ground, ringing sharply. She stepped back, hands trembling, eyes fixed on the dust as though it had opened beneath her. The trader stared, confused. The villagers watched in stunned silence. She said nothing. She simply turned and walked away. That was when people began to realize her silence was not emptiness. It was a boundary. And whatever lay on the other side of it, she was protecting it fiercely. After that day, the village no longer pretended not to notice. The sound of those coins hitting the ground lingered in people's minds, sharper than any argument. It replayed in conversations, in glances exchanged across the market, in the sudden pauses when her name was mentioned. What had once seemed like quiet humility now felt like something else, something fragile and strangely dangerous. People began to test the boundaries she had drawn. Not out of cruelty at first, but curiosity. A woman left a small bundle of coins beside a bowl of food at her doorway, thinking kindness might soften whatever rule the woman lived by. By morning, the food was gone. The coins remained, untouched, neatly arranged as if they had been placed there deliberately. A farmer asked her to help harvest his field and, at the end of the day, slipped payment into her basket when her back was turned. She noticed immediately. Her hands froze mid-motion. Slowly, carefully, she removed the coins and set them on the ground between them, creating space where there had been none. "I can't," she said softly. It was the first time many had heard her refuse with words. The farmer laughed awkwardly, waving his hand as if it were nothing. "Everyone can," he replied. "That's how the world works." She met his eyes then, and something in her expression made him stop smiling. There was no anger there, only a deep, settled certainty that felt older than any rule he knew. "I can't," she repeated. The testing did not stop. Some were gentler. Others were not. A group of traders joked loudly about her as she passed, clinking coins together in their palms, calling out offers they knew she would not accept. When she walked faster, head lowered, their laughter faded into uneasy silence. The joke had missed its mark. Children, too young to understand, began to play games. They dared one another to run up and touch a coin to her hand. When one boy tried, she flinched so hard she nearly fell. His smile vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. He ran home crying, insisting he had done something wrong. That night, she did not light her fire. From her hut came no smoke, no sound. A woman passing by noticed and paused, listening. Nothing. Only the wind moving through the grass. For the first time, someone wondered if the boundary she guarded so fiercely was costing her more than she could bear. The next morning, she returned as if nothing had happened. She carried water. She swept her yard. She helped an old woman grind grain until her arms shook. But those who watched closely saw the change. Her movements were slower. Her eyes lingered too long on the ground. When coins clinked nearby, her shoulders tightened, her breath shallow. The market felt different now. Money, once invisible in its normalcy, had become loud. Every exchange echoed. Every payment carried weight. People began to feel it in their hands, the cold certainty of metal, and wondered why she reacted as if it were something sharp. One afternoon, an elder called her to sit beneath the trading tree. His voice was calm, his posture open. He placed a single coin between them on the earth. "Tell us," he said gently, "why does this trouble you so?" Her gaze dropped to the coin. The world seemed to narrow to that small circle of metal. For a long moment, she did not breathe. Then she reached out, not to touch it, but to push it away with the tip of her finger, slow and careful, as though even closeness carried danger. "I promised," she whispered. "To whom?" the elder asked. She shook her head. Her silence fell heavier than any explanation. Around them, the village waited, realizing for the first time that whatever lay behind her refusal was not superstition or pride. It was a wound, and it was far from healed. By the time the dry season reached its peak, the village no longer spoke of her in the same way. Where her name had once been followed by warmth or quiet respect, it was now often paired with uncertainty. People still greeted her. They still accepted her help. But something cautious had entered their voices, as if they were stepping around a crack in the ground they could not see. The rumors grew teeth. Some said her refusal was an insult, that she believed herself above everyone else, untouched by the struggles money was meant to ease. Others argued the opposite, that she carried a curse so heavy it could spill into the village if she ever accepted payment. A few claimed she was being punished by something unseen, and that her vow was not devotion, but fear. She heard none of it directly, but she felt it. The invitations stopped first. Work still came, but only when absolutely needed. Laughter softened when she approached, then resumed after she passed. Children still ran to her, but parents called them back more quickly now, their eyes watchful. Still she gave. When a woman went into labor too early, she stayed through the night, boiling water, wiping sweat, whispering calm into the room. When a hunter returned empty-handed for days in a row, she shared her portion of food without being asked. Each act of kindness cost her something, and she paid it willingly. Money remained the line she would not cross. The turning point came when the rains failed. The river shrank. Crops wilted before they could mature. Traders from other villages raised their prices, counting coins with practiced indifference. Suddenly, money was no longer just useful, it was urgent. It meant survival. An elder came to her hut one evening, his shadow long in the fading light. "There is work," he said carefully. "Hard work. Dangerous work. We will pay well." She nodded. "I will come." "You must understand," he continued, choosing his words, This time there is no other way. The payment cannot be avoided. Her hands paused in the motion of tying her sandals. For a moment, she looked very tired. "I will come," she said again. "But I cannot take it." The elder exhaled slowly. "Then do not come." The words hung between them. The next morning, she came anyway. She joined the men clearing a new channel toward the river, digging under the unforgiving sun. The work tore at her hands and burned her skin, but she did not stop. When her strength failed, she rested briefly, then stood again. No one told her to leave. No one told her to stay. By dusk, the channel was complete. Water began to move. The village watched as life returned, slow and cautious. To the fields. Relief washed over faces drawn tight by fear. Someone pressed a small pouch of coins into her hand, not angrily this time, but with desperation. "Please," the man said. "You earned this." Her fingers curled around the pouch before she realized what she was holding. The reaction was instant. Her breath caught. Her knees buckled. The pouch slipped from her grasp, spilling coins into the dirt. She fell to her knees beside them, one hand pressed to her chest, the other trembling violently. People rushed forward, then stopped, unsure. Her eyes filled with tears she did not wipe away. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. "I already paid." The words made no sense. Paid with what? Paid to whom? She pushed herself up, leaving the coins where they lay, and walked away unsteadily, her shoulders shaking. That night, she did not eat. She did not speak. From her hut came the sound of quiet sobbing, carried by the dry wind. The village stood divided in the dark. Because whatever price she had paid, it was clear now that it was far greater than money. The crisis did not wait for understanding. Only days after the river was redirected, the village received word that the next supply caravan would not come. Bandits had taken the main road. Trade was frozen. What little grain remained had to last, or the village would face hunger far worse than before. This time, there was no confusion about what was needed. Money. Traders from the hills would still come, they said, but only if payment was made in advance. Not promises. Not favors. Coins placed directly into their hands. The elders gathered beneath the trading tree, voices low, faces lined with worry. Calculations were made, pouches opened, amounts counted again and again. Still, it was not enough. The village was short. Someone finally spoke her name. The air shifted. Everyone knew what it meant. She was the one who could make the difference. She always had been. She had strength when others faltered, calm when fear took hold. But now the thing she refused was the thing they needed most. An elder went to her hut at dawn. She opened the door before he knocked, as if she had been expecting him. Her eyes were swollen from sleeplessness, her face drawn, but her posture was steady. "They will come if we pay," he said. "Without it, they will not." She nodded once. "There is no other way," he added. Silence stretched between them. In the distance, a child cried. Somewhere, a pot clanged against stone. "I know," she said. They brought her to the gathering. The market, usually loud and crowded, stood eerily still. People formed a wide circle around her. In the center, on a woven cloth, lay the coins collected from every household. It was more money than she had ever stood near at once. The sight of it made her sway. She closed her eyes, breathing carefully, as if steadying herself against a rising wave. When she opened them again, there was resolve there, sharp, painful, undeniable. "I will do it," she said. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "But you must understand," she continued, her voice low but clear, "what you ask does not end when the coins leave my hand." No one knew what she meant. An elder stepped forward and gently lifted a pouch. He held it out to her with both hands, his expression heavy with apology and hope. Her hands rose slowly. They hovered in the air, trembling, inches from the pouch. Sweat beaded on her brow. Her breath came in short, uneven pulls. The village watched, barely daring to blink. When her fingers finally closed around the pouch, a sound escaped her, not quite a cry, not quite a gasp. Her body stiffened, then folded inward, as if something inside her had broken loose. She dropped to her knees. The pouch fell. Coins spilled across the cloth, flashing in the light like scattered bones. She pressed her palms flat against the ground, shaking, her head bowed low. "I remember," she whispered. The words were not meant for anyone else. For a long moment, no one moved. Then she did something no one expected. She reached out again and picked up the pouch. This time, she did not flinch. Her face was pale, her eyes distant, as if she were standing in two places at once. She rose unsteadily to her feet, holding the money as though it weighed more than stone. "I will walk it to them," she said. "Alone." A protest rose immediately, but she cut it off with a single look, gentle, firm, final. "If I am to touch this," she said, "then I must finish what I began." She turned and started down the road toward the hills. Behind her, the village watched in silence, fear tightening every chest. Because something in her voice made it clear, this was not a transaction. It was a reckoning. She did not return by nightfall. The road to the hills disappeared into tall grass and red dust, twisting out of sight long before the sun sank behind the trees. When darkness settled and her figure did not reappear, unease spread through the village like cold through water. Fires were lit, then left untended. No one slept. Just before dawn, a boy came running from the edge of the road, breathless, eyes wide. "She's coming," he shouted. "She's hurt." They met her where the path widened into the fields. Her walk was slow, uneven. Dust clung to her skin. One sleeve was torn. A dark stain spread across the cloth at her side. But she was upright, still moving forward. No pouch hung from her hand. The elders rushed to support her, guiding her to sit beneath the trading tree. Someone offered water. Someone else reached instinctively for coins, then froze, remembering. She raised her hand weakly. "No," she said. "It's done." "What happened?" someone asked. She shook her head, eyes closing briefly, as if pushing back a tide of images. Before she could speak again, an old woman stepped forward. She was bent with age, her hair white as ash. Few noticed her most days. Fewer still remembered that she had once lived beyond the river, long before the market had grown. "I know," the old woman said quietly. The circle tightened. "I know why she would not touch money," she continued, "and why she does now." The woman beneath the tree did not look up, but her shoulders sagged, as if a weight she had carried alone had finally been named. Years ago, the old woman said, there had been another village. Smaller, poorer, forgotten by trade routes. A place where promises were easier to break because no one outside would ever hear about them. That village had been desperate. Traders came with food, medicine, and protection, but at a price that was never written down. Coins changed hands, yes, but something else was taken too. Children. Not all at once. One here, one there. Always explained away as work, as opportunity, as a better life somewhere beyond the hills. One woman had refused. She sold nothing. She signed nothing. She paid instead with her own body, her own labor, her own years. She worked until her hands bled. She carried loads meant for animals. She stood in place of others when punishment was demanded. When that was not enough, she made a vow. She would never again touch money that had been stained with bargaining lives. She would live outside it, serve without it, starve without it if she had to. She believed that if she removed herself completely, the debt would stop with her. The old woman's voice trembled now. "She saved many," she said. "But not all." A hush fell over the crowd. The woman beneath the tree finally lifted her head. Tears ran freely down her face, but her gaze was clear. "I thought if I refused it," she said softly, "it could never ask for more." She opened her palm. There, pressed into her skin, was a deep, circular mark, raw and red, as if something had burned her long ago and never fully healed. "They recognized me on the road," she continued. "They remembered the vow. They took the coins. But they took nothing else." A breath passed through the village, half relief, half horror. "Why now?" an elder whispered. She closed her hand. "Because hunger does not listen to promises," she said. "And some debts return whether you invite them or not." The village stood silent, realizing the truth had only just begun to surface. Her refusal had never been fear. It had been resistance. And touching the money again meant reopening a past she had fought to bury. The elders gathered again at sunrise, but this time there were no arguments. Only listening. The woman sat among them, not apart, her back straight despite the pain that still lingered in her body. The mark on her palm had darkened overnight, a bruised circle that drew the eye and tightened the chest of anyone who saw it. No one asked to touch it. No one asked for proof. They had all felt it. The old woman spoke again, her voice steadier now, as if speaking the truth had given her strength. The traders she met were not new men, she said. They were sons of the old ones. They inherited the roads, the rules, and the debts. To them, money was never just money. It was memory. The woman nodded slowly. When I walked toward them, she said, I knew they would test me. Not with words. With recognition. She described how the men had laid the coins out in a line, just as their fathers once had. How they had watched her hands instead of her face. How the road had gone quiet, waiting. When I picked up the pouch, she continued, I felt the past open. Every choice I thought I had sealed away came back to stand in front of me. Her voice did not break. They asked me why I had returned to it, she said. I told them I had not. It had returned to me. She explained then what no one had ever known. Years ago, when the traders first came to her village, she had been young, strong, certain that sacrifice could end any cruelty if it was deep enough. She believed that by placing herself between the money and the children, she could stop the trade completely. And for a time, she had. The roads shifted. The traders moved on. The taking slowed, then stopped. But the cost did not disappear. It settled into her bones. I learned something too late, she said quietly. Refusing money does not destroy it. It only delays its reach. The full truth lay there now, plain and unbearable. Her vow had not been a rejection of survival. It had been an act of containment. She had lived outside money not because she despised it, but because she knew how easily it erased faces and turned lives into numbers. By refusing it, she made herself a wall. And walls, she had learned, are meant to be worn down. When your village called me, she said, looking around at the familiar faces, I thought I could keep the past from touching you. I was wrong. A murmur of guilt passed through the circle. You did not force me, she added. I chose to pay again. This time, however, the payment was different. They took the coins, she said, because that is what they wanted to see. But they also took my promise. She reached into the folds of her cloth and removed a small, worn strip of leather. Faded marks were carved into it, tallies of something counted long ago. It is finished, she said. They will not come again. Not for your children. Not for anyone on this road. The elders sat in stunned silence. All at once, her years of refusal took on a shape no one had seen before. The hunger she had endured. The loneliness. The quiet suffering that had seemed unnecessary, even foolish. It had been deliberate. She had lived as proof that some values cannot be exchanged without cost. The market, the coins, the trading tree, all of it still existed. But now it stood alongside a truth far heavier than money itself. And the village finally understood why her hands had trembled every time she came near it. Because touching money had never been about wealth. It had always been about remembering what it had once demanded. A quiet change settled over the village after the truth was spoken. Not the kind that announced itself with noise or ceremony, but the kind that rearranged meaning. The market still opened. Coins still passed from hand to hand. Children still ran through the dust. Yet nothing felt the same, because now everyone knew what had been standing among them all along. They began to see her differently. The time she had gone without food were no longer small acts of pride. They were choices. The moments she had stepped away from payment were not stubbornness, but refusal to let old violence breathe again. Every boundary she had drawn had been a line placed between the village and a history that devoured the vulnerable. The elders returned the next day with a decision. They placed a woven basket at the base of the trading tree, not in her hands, not in her hut, but in the open. Inside it were tools, food, cloth, and seeds. No coins. This is not payment, the eldest among them said. It is belonging. She looked at the basket for a long time. Then she nodded. For the first time since anyone could remember, she accepted help without stepping back. She never touched the money again. But now, no one tried to make her. The village changed its ways in small but powerful steps. When traders came, elders stood closer. Questions were asked where silence once lived. Deals were watched, not blindly trusted. Money remained, but it was no longer worshipped as neutral or harmless. And the children were never sent away alone. As for her, she stayed. She continued to work, to listen, to give. But the weight in her shoulders slowly eased. At night, smoke once again rose from her fire. Laughter, quiet, surprised laughter, returned to her voice. Sometimes, when the market grew loud, she would walk its edges and watch the coins pass. Her hands no longer trembled. The mark on her palm faded into a thin scar, a reminder rather than a wound. One evening, a child asked her, "Is money bad?" She thought for a moment before answering. "No," she said gently. "But forgetting what it can cost is." The child nodded, not fully understanding, but one day they would. When the woman eventually grew old, people told her story not as a warning, but as a lesson. About what it means to protect others without being asked. About choosing sacrifice when easier paths exist. About knowing that value is not always counted, weighed, or exchanged. And so the folktale lived on. Not as the story of a woman who refused money, but as the story of a woman who paid a price so no one else would have to. The village never forgot the day she returned from the hills. Even years later, people would speak of it in quiet tones, as if the words themselves carried weight. The memory was not of coins scattered on dirt or the sun striking her pale, weary face. It was of the truth she had carried, heavy in her chest, and the lesson that had reshaped everyone who witnessed. She had walked alone to deliver what money could not deliver on its own. A promise, a protection, a wall against the hunger and fear that had stalked generations. And when she returned, the village began to understand the depth of her sacrifice. Life went on, but differently. Coins were still exchanged, markets still thrived, but the rhythm had changed. The villagers now looked at money not as a tool of survival alone, but as something to respect, something that carried memory and consequence. Elders taught the children about her refusal, and why sometimes a choice must be made not for yourself, but to protect others. The story spread beyond the village, carried on trade routes, told by travelers who had glimpsed a woman living outside the ordinary rules, yet more human than anyone else. She remained part of the village, quiet and steadfast. She tilled fields, guided children, repaired roofs, and offered comfort, but never again touched a coin. Her hands, once trembling with the memory of old debts, now moved freely in labor, in care, in love. She carried nothing of material wealth, but in her presence, the village carried a sense of safety and clarity they had never known before. And when a stranger arrived asking for help, the villagers no longer whispered or hesitated. They would take the child by the hand, place tools in their arms, offer food from their homes, and remember the woman who had taught them the price of protection. Money could buy nothing here. Humanity and courage were what mattered most. In her final years, she would sit beneath the trading tree, watching the children play, watching coins glint in the sun, and occasionally smile. The scar on her palm had faded into a thin, pale line, a reminder of pain endured and vows kept. She never spoke of her suffering unless asked, and when she did, her words were soft, not bitter. "Value is not always counted," she said once to a child, "but it is always felt." And the child understood, in a way that would grow with them over the years. When she died, the village mourned quietly, not because she was gone, but because the world had lost someone who had shown them the impossible measure of sacrifice and love. Coins were laid at her grave, but no one touched them. Instead, they left flowers, water, and hand-carved trinkets, symbols of gratitude that carried no weight other than meaning. Her story became legend, a living folktale passed from elder to child, from one village to the next. Every telling emphasized the courage it took to refuse the world's currency, not out of disdain, but out of love. The moral was clear. True wealth is measured not by what you take, but by what you protect, by the sacrifices you endure quietly, and by the lives you shield from harm. Long after her voice was gone, her presence remained in every careful act, every shared meal, every hand extended without expectation. And in that quiet, enduring way, The woman who had refused to touch money taught an entire village, indeed generations, that the deepest value is invisible, and that sometimes, saying no is the greatest gift of all. The coins on the market continued to clink and jingle, but now they were always accompanied by memory, respect, and a silent acknowledgment of the woman who had walked beyond them, and taught everyone how to see the world differently. Because in the end, what seemed strange, even unsettling, was nothing less than love. And that love left the village, and everyone who heard the story, forever changed.